quick summary of the Parsha. Parsha Vayigash, 5783, is the Jewish people all go down to Egypt because Yosef reveals himself to his brothers, and he calls for his father Yaakov and all of his family to come from Israel to Egypt, and that's how the Jewish people end up there, setting up the events of the beginning of Sefer Shemot. The Jewish people need to be rescued from Mitzrayim. All right, and now to get into the nitty-gritty, the deep dive into the verses themselves, we're going to start with the very, very first verse. Excuse me. All right, so the verse tells us, and this is where the name of the parsha comes from, Vayigash. Vayigash means stood up, right? Vayigash elav Yehuda. Yehuda stood up to Yosef. Doesn't know it's Yosef yet. Please let your servant say a few words into your ear. Don't be angry at your servant, because you are like Pharaoh. There's going to be quite a bit to say on this verse, and we're going to start with an Or HaChaim. So the Or HaChaim wonders, what exactly changed? To give this some context, the very end of the previous parsha, the end of Mikeitz, Yehuda very humbly, speaking to Yosef, please, let Binyamin go. It's not his fault. He couldn't have done this thing. We're innocent people. This will kill my father, etc., etc. He's being very, very politic and very polite. And suddenly, this week's parsha begins with Vayigash al Elav. He came up to him like threateningly, is how Chazal seem to understand it. He approached him the way you should not approach somebody in Yosef's position. Yosef has the power of life and death, and he could have just said off with his head, and nobody would have blinked an eye, because that's what you do to somebody who does this Vayigash action that Yehuda does. So the question really is, what changed that caused Yehuda to do this? And to understand this, we're going to have to look at, yes, that's true, it happens sometimes, we're going to have to look at a previous verse. So first of all, let's look at the Rashi. Rashi on this verse, Al yichar apcha, please don't be angry at me. Mekan atalamed shediber alav kashot. From this, even forget about the word vayigash, forget about the fact that it's already indicated that he stood up to him, literally, not stood up for him, stood up to him, right? So that's already an offense in the royal court. But besides that, he said, please don't let my words make you angry, which Rashi says implies that there's something in his words or in his mannerism or in the way he speaks that's going to make him, that should potentially make Yosef angry. Again, not knowing that it's Yosef. So we have to understand why that's true. And to understand it, we're going to look at the Or HaChaim on the end of last week's parsha, right? The last few verses there. We're not going to read the whole thing. It's quite a long piece. But starting on chapter 44, verses 16 and 17, right? And there basically it says, Yehuda said, what can we say to my Lord? How can we speak? How can we justify ourselves? God has found sin in your servants. Here we are. We're ready to be slaves to you. Even the one in whose hand the goblet was found, will all be your servants. And then Yosef is like, no. I don't want all of you. I just want Binyamin. That's going to be my one and only slave. And so after that reply, that's when Yehuda's was just speaking, and very kindly, right? Now all of a sudden he's going to say, whoa, we're not going to do that. I'm paraphrasing, and he's much more rough in how he responds to Yosef now, which again we need to understand why. So to understand why, we need to understand why he spoke to him that way first. So so he says, Manitz Tadak. Of the many things, there's a group of rhetorical questions that Yehuda asks. He says, what can we say? How can we speak? How can we justify ourselves? So on the phrase man nitztadak, and the Or HaChaim explains each one of these phrases, but this is not for now. Well, for our purposes, let's focus on this man nitztadak. How can we justify ourselves? Perish. The explanation is b'mishpat. Let me see. How can we justify ourselves if, for example, if we were placed in front of judges? Oh, what do you mean? What judges? For what? Ki ein miflat lahem b'chulan. The brothers would not have been able to justify or escape punishment for what they did. What did they do? Ein ze elamasa elokim hema lipara mehem avonam. This must be an act of Hashem for what we've done. What did they do? They sold Yosef. So they know. Yehuda is basically saying, I know, based on this, I know for a fact that all of this, you think this is about the cup, and you think this is about Binyamin, and you think this is about money. It's not about that. All of this is a setup to punish us for what we really did. Man nitztadak, how could we justify ourselves for what we really did? And that is, we sold Yosef down the river, literally, right? And so that being the case, he then continues. The Or HaChaim says, "Ki Binyamin lo haya mechazzirin kesev hashev." We got a little problem with this though, because give me one moment. Sorry. All right. Sorry about that. Things happen when you switch up the schedule, huh? Lo haya machzirim kesev hashev. Remember, the goblet, that cup of Yosef, was found in Binyamin's sack, and so we have a little bit of a problem, because there's no since it was found in Binyamin's things, it seems to imply that Binyamin is guilty for something. But we have a big problem with that. And what's that? Binyamin wasn't involved in the sale of Yosef. He wasn't there. He was the younger brother who was left at home with Yaakov when all of this went down. So why is Binyamin being punished? So he goes on to say, Al derech omrim, based on what it says in the Gemara in Sanhedrin 93, Shnei Eitzim Yeveshim v'chad Ratov v'chule. If there's 3 pieces of wood, 2 of them are dry and 1 of them is wet, ordinarily, if the wet one was all alone, the wet piece of wood would have been all alone, and a fire would come by, it wouldn't affect this 3rd piece of wood. But if there's 3 pieces of wood and 2 of them are dry, the majority is going to involve the 3rd piece, the minority, which is, in this case, the wet piece of wood. That Gemara is basically telling us that sometimes it happens that when justice is being laid out, sometimes innocent people get taken together with the non-innocent people. Therefore, since the majority of the people being judged right now, in other words, the 10 brothers, Yehuda, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, all the brothers, Yisachar, Asher, I'm not going to name them all, right? So because they are all to blame for the selling of Yosef, even though Binyamin is innocent, he's that wet piece of wood being surrounded by these dry pieces of wood. He's also going to get burnt. That's the way that the Or HaChaim understands it. V'kevan shekulam nilkedu avonam, since all the rest of them are guilty of the sin, hu haya imahem, and he's with them, nilkad bishchitotam. He's also going to be punished together with them. So then he continues. So that in and of itself shouldn't change how Yehuda speaks to Yosef. But in other words, we want to set up his mindset. Right? What exactly was Yehuda thinking at the time? Yehuda was thinking all of this is mina shamayim, all of this is justice, and if you want us to be prisoners, we deserve it because we're guilty of this sin. And Binyamin, even though he's not guilty of the sin, he deserves to be with us because that's how Hashem does his justice. That sometimes even quote unquote innocent people are taken together with the guilty. Okay, I understand that. And then Yosef responds. And what does Yosef say? He says, Chalilali, God forbid I should do such a thing. I don't want all of you to be my slaves. I just want Binyamin to be my slave. So that's now Yehuda is going to get up and say, wait a minute. That's not how that works. Right? When everybody else is punished, so the innocent get punished too. Okay. We're not going to get into how just that is. It's an interesting question worth discussing, I'm sure. But that if that's a rule, that's a rule. Okay, I got nothing to say about that. But you're only going to punish Binyamin. You're only going to take him, and the rest of us who are actually guilty are going to go off scot-free. That ain't going to happen. That's now Yehuda is going to get up and be angry, and now Yehuda is going to speak disrespectfully because now he sees that he's not dealing with Hashem's justice anymore. What's he dealing with? What is he dealing with? See, to him, in his mind, the way the Or HaChaim understands it, he's dealing with somebody who is just an unjust tyrant. And an unjust tyrant needs to be confronted. Whether you're going to get hurt, whether you're going to get killed, whether the tyrant is going to listen to you or not, once you get up and say unjust, wrong things, you are subject to punishment. And Yehuda was ready to stand up to that kind of tyranny. And that's how the parsha begins, and that's why Vayigash, that's why Yehuda stands up the way he does. And if you want to learn more about that particular basically attack on Yosef, at least verbal attack, you could see we speak about that quite a bit in previous parsha classes. You can look it up on the playlist. The next piece I'd like to say is also on this verse. It's on this verse. If you recall, let's go back to the verse. It says at the very end, he says, please, let me speak to you and don't be angry at me, etc., etc. And then the last three words are ki chamocha kaparo, because you are like Pharaoh. That's what he says. You are like Pharaoh. What does that mean, you're like Pharaoh? Good question, right? Rashi asks the question. And unfortunately, or fortunately, as we shall see, he gives two answers, two seemingly contradictory answers, as you'll see in just a moment. Rashi says, and it's very interesting, this in today's class, we don't often do it like this. In fact, I've noticed that we unfortunately don't quote Rashi often enough, but it seems like in most of the commentaries on today's class, we're going to be learning a Rashi and then learning commentaries on that Rashi to make that Rashi sort of flush it out and make more sense so we can absorb it better. All right. Ki chamocha kaparo. So it says Rashi, chashuva be'enei kemelech. Be'enei kemelech. It looks, in my eyes, you are as chashuv, as important as a king. You are like a king. That's how you might understand ki chamocha kaparo. You are like Pharaoh. Zehu pshuto, and that's the simple pshat. Midrasho, in the Midrash, Sovcha lilkot alav bitarat kimot shalika paro al yedei zakenti yisara al laila achad sheikva. You're like Paro because you can get sarat just like your predecessor, or previous Paro, got when he took Sarah, Abraham's wife, for one night. Right? Paro thought that Sarah was unmarried. He took her. Before having a chance to sleep with her, he gets sarat. He and his whole household get sick, and and he releases her and realizes that she's married. There's a whole story there. That's not for now. That's Parshat Lech Lecha. So, what do you mean? This is the exact opposite. First he said, you're chashuv, you're important to me like a king. And then, you can get sarat just like the other Pharaoh, just like the other Pharaoh. Davar acher, another interpretation. Ma Paro goes over inu mekayim, just like Paro can make a rule and it's not going to be accepted. That happens, right? Sometimes kings, governments make rules and the people don't know or don't accept it. Hivtiach inu osa af atakain, and even he doesn't always do what he says he's going to do. You are just like that. Whoa. First, the Pashut explanation, according to Rashi, is you are like, oh my goodness, you are like Paro, you are like the king. Oh, you're so important. And his second explanation, the Midrash explanation, is you're a nobody. You're a nothing. You can get sarat. You can make up rules that nobody's going to listen to. You're a nobody. You're a nothing. So which is it, Yosef? Or which is it, Yehuda? Which Paro are you which Paro are you comparing him to? So this Emet Yaakov from Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky is in Yiddish, in the yeshiva, it's called yisodistic. This is a yisod. This is a rule of Torah interpretation that if nothing else, and by the way, there's plenty of beautiful stuff in Emet Yaakov. We've been quoting Emet Yaakov on and off for all these years, these 2.5 years that we've been giving this class, right? So there's plenty in Emet Yaakov to see as important and beautiful. We have a whole class once on the life of Yaakov Kamenetsky. All right. Either way, if nothing else is important in Emet Yaakov, and of course, like I just said, that's not true. But even if nothing else, this essay should be on a monument somewhere. This essay is beautiful and perfect and teaches us an important lesson in Torah interpretation. That if you can remember this, it's wonderful. By the way, I think I heard from Rabbi Isaac Bernstein that the Lubavitcher Rebbe has a similar essay on this, also maybe on this very same Rashi, basically saying the same thing in quite a bit longer. Also, I'm sure very beautiful prose, and that's somewhere in the Sichot, Likutei Sichot, I'm guessing. All right, Perish Rashi. So first he quotes the Rashi, the whole thing with you are as important as a king, and then you're a nobody. You can get sarat, or you can make up rules nobody listens to. And then he says on this line here that's now at the top of the screen, Tzarech lebayer. We have to explain. Im pishutohu chashuvata be'inai kemelech. Im kein lama bo bale hadrash amru hafech. How can, if the pashut pshat, the simple explanation is you are important to me as a king, how dare? Where does the gumption come from in the midrash to say the exact opposite? The exact opposite. So you're not important if you can get sarat. You're not important if you can make up rules nobody listens to. You're not important if you don't listen to your own rules. How can they say that? Shehatris kenegdo v'kama zalzulin. Ve'ech yitaken mehadrash it naged al hapshat min hakasa al hakasa. So this obviously needs some sort of explanation of al ha'emet nira the emet bekol dibur v'dibur shalanu yesh pshat vidrash. Oh, in all of our conversations, in all human discourse, there's always going to be pshat and drash. L'dugma, for example, ninkod ma shemitzinu le'eb Parshat Vayishlach. He gives an example earlier in Parshat Vayishlach. Shenamar Yaakov le'esav ki al kein re'iti panecha kirot panei Elokim u'tartzeni. When Yaakov finally meets Yosef, when Yaakov finally meets Esav, What does he tell him? The first thing he tells him is, seeing your face is like seeing the face of an angel, of God. The Parish Rashi, and Rashi there says, Ki kadai v'hagun lecha shenitkabel minchati al asher re'iti panecha. So you're worthy of me giving you gifts. Hashuvim li kariyat pnei hamalach shere'iti sar shelcha. Or, says Rashi, or it means seeing your face reminds me of the time, a few hours ago, when I wrestled an angel which had your face, and I beat him. I defeated him. So which is it, Yaakov? Is it, oh my goodness, you have like the face of a king, of a god, and I should be giving you gifts? Or is it, you have the face of the angel I just beat up? I just wiped the floor with an angel with the same face as yours. Two different things, right? So this kind of thing happens a lot. There's a pshat and there's a drash. Now, the way that that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky and Emet Yaakov here is going to define pshat and drash in our probably the best English equivalent is, he's basically saying that pshat is the obvious meaning of the word, and drash is the insinuation. That there's always, in all dialogue, in all discussions between people, there can always be a statement that can, on the one hand, be the meaning, the pshat, and then it can be an undercurrent, an under meaning, a secondary meaning, right? A backhanded compliment, for instance. Like you can say to somebody, something like the classic example in the Gemara is if you ask about this particular person, say Sarah, right, and the response is Sarah's oven is always cooking. So it could mean, right? It could mean she has lots of guests, and it's a wonderful thing. It could mean that she's overly how do you say, feeding people a little too much. She's always cooking, she's always eating, she's never doing anything more productive than that, right? So, or that she takes a long time to cook, or whatever. There could be all kinds of interpretations of that phrase. So that's why that's the classic example of a phrase you shouldn't say as a compliment, because it can be taken in different ways. All right, so that's what Rav Yaakov is saying. Kolomar le kishichidu hidur toch dvarav yitayra memenu shaharei yishma shehu ragil lipigash imalachim. So he's interpreting that discussion between Yaakov and Esau. Ukamokain Khan says the same thing here. As far as Yehuda knows, he's talking to this guy named Tzafnat Paneach. Doesn't know who it is. He doesn't know that it's Yosef. et kalkalat Medinat Mitzrayim v'chol hamedinot. He's in charge of Egypt and all these other countries. Everybody's going to him. The sivo of Aretz b'ofen shel chachma musar. Right? Achar kach roa hu kishara chishdam l'meraglim l'hachalit l'kulam. First, he thought he must be wise. He must be a great person, right? He's in charge of distributing food to all these people. And then he comes and accuses us of being spies. We're not spies. We have nothing to do with that. Guess he's not so smart after all. V'al kol panim, acharei avur gimel yamim ba'alehem shebetzaj lekulam yeshuvu l'baita v'yiklu atem et sheva ravon bateinu. They were going to go back to their house to get rid of the hunger, right? Ki yirehu et Elokim v'kein b'chol inyanov. Hello, Vada Hu Shahu Haya Be'inav Gadol Harbek Miparo. He should be as big as Paro. So that is Pashut. That Pashut Pshat is still true. He is as big as Paro. He's a great, important person. But there's an undercurrent. It's very clear that he's speaking to him very angrily. V'zu hashkafa klilat kilomar hamidrashim she'elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim, and that's this phrase that's very important in learning Torah. The elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. This is to be a good bumper sticker to have. This and that are the words of the living God. You have different interpretations. You have Rashi, you have Rambam, you have Ramban, you have the Ibn Ezra, you have lots of different commentaries, and sometimes they seem to argue. The brilliance of later commentaries, and of those commentaries as well, is that they can explain how all of them are still true. Rashi is right, and Ramban is right, and Rambam is right. Everybody's right. Right? V'gam kemo shenimtza b'Torah pardes, kemo came b'kol adam yesh pardes. It says just like we find that in the Torah there's pardes, which is pshat, remez, drush, and sod, the different levels of interpretation. There's the simple interpretation. There's the remez, is the hints of the Torah. There's the drush, which is the ethical teachings of the Torah. There's the sod, the secret Kabbalistic teachings of the Torah. So just like in every phrase in the Torah, there's pardes. Kimo kain kol adam yesh pardes. Every person has this pardes level. Everybody, whenever you talk and whatever you say, is going to have this this kind of could have levels of interpretation which aren't necessarily wrong. So, for example, I was telling somebody recently that my kids are telling me that one of the new phrases. I don't know how well this is going to age, by the way. This is on YouTube, right? But one of the new phrases now is if you like what somebody's doing, you say something to the effect of, or somebody's wearing something, right? And you like how they look in it. You say, I love that on you, right? I love that on you. Not that I love that, or not that you look good in that, right? I love that on you. So to me, in my in my old way of thinking, perhaps a little old school here in some ways, I thought that sounds like a backhanded compliment. No, right? It's like I love that, but on you, like, not anywhere else. Maybe in the trash heap or on you, but definitely not on me. Right? So this how it's meant could be meant both ways. It does look good on you. I love that on you. So it could be meant in a positive way, but there could be some internal dialogue going on in the speaker's head, and that's exactly what happens in the Torah, and that's what Rashi is doing throughout the Torah. Wherever Rashi says the Pashut Pshat is this, the Pashut Pshat in this case is that he's praising him. He's just like Pharaoh, like a king, but underneath it all, he's also saying you're a nobody. Right? And so it's this double meaning in everything he says, which is normal for the Torah, and that's a rule of Torah interpretation that's worth studying. But besides that, it's worth knowing that all of us have that ability to say one thing, but really mean it in many different other ways. That's I think a beautiful beautiful lesson from Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky. All right, let's go on. Let's skip to chapter 45, verse 10. So just to let you know what happened here so far, we've got Yosef, and he's revealed himself to his brothers. He's no longer Tzafnat Paneach. He is indeed Yosef, and they have a hard time believing it, as you'll see. But aside from everything else, he invites them to bring the whole family and to settle in Goshen. And his phrase of how he asks them to do it is worth paying attention to, as you'll see in a moment. It's different than how just 8 verses later, Pharaoh says the almost exact same verse, almost word for word, with one little change. Let's see what that is. So chapter 45, verse 10, it says, Veshafta ba'aretz Goshen, Come and settle in the land of Goshen. Hayita karov elai, you're going to be close to me. Atao v'necha, you and your sons, v'nei v'necha, and your sons' sons, toncha v'korcha v'kol asher lach, your flocks, your animals, and everything that belongs to you. Beautiful. Nice invitation. And then, like I said, 8 verses later, chapter 45, verse 18. Ukhu et avihem. You see, Paro says, "Bring your father." He's still talking to the 11 brothers, right? At Batechem and his household, Bao Elai, and bring them to me. Na lachem at Tuv haaretz, and I will give them the good of the land, Eretz Mitzrayim. V'ichlu at Chelev haaretz, and they're going to eat the fat of the land. So this is a little bit strange because it sounds like Paro is more generous than Yosef. Yosef's like, come, bring the family, bring your animals, and then you'll be able to obviously work the animals, and you'll be okay. He didn't say that, but that's kind of the implication. Like, why else are you bringing your livestock? Leave them if you're not going to use them. And Paro is like, no, it doesn't even mention the livestock. Instead, you're going to eat from the fat of the land. Don't worry about a thing. Don't even have to work. You'll be set. You're on vacation. Paid vacation. So answers Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Zecher Tzadok Levracha, and Talmud Dikra. He brings this verse, Atav v'necha, etc. Tzon v'korcha. Hakpid she'avo ito tzono v'koro kadei she'yuchal le'omer Paro she'itnu lahem eretz Goshen kidehalan aval Paro amar. Paro said, Amar Tano al et be'irachem v'lchu Kanan ani aten lachem eglot acherot. He's going to take care of them. They're going to have other. He's going to give them these wagons, and they're going to be taken care of. Everything's going to be fine. You won't need to bring your animals. So later on, we learn that the reason that he didn't want them to bring animals to Egypt is not because he's so generous and he wants them to be on easy street, but because farming and husbandry and taking care of animals and herds and stuff like that is a to'eva to Mitzrayim. The Egyptians are for some reason disgusted by the idea of shepherds, right? That's one of the reasons why in last week's parsha, in the end of Mikeitz, that the Egyptians wouldn't eat with the Jews because they just find it disgusting. The Jews even do these kinds of things, that they watch animals. That's so gross, especially considering, and it's not because they don't like animals, it's the other way around. They like animals too much. They worship the animals. So to them, it's like it's a disrespect to their God that somebody is shepherding them, right? Can you imagine the image? The image is amazing. Somebody's God. You take you take a Buddha, right? A Buddha statue in somebody's store and stick like a fishing line into his mouth, right? And pull it. Right? So that would be disrespectful, right? So that's basically how they thought of shepherding. They were kind of disgusted by the whole thing. It's not because he's so generous that he doesn't mention their animals. It's because for him it's a disgusting thing. However, right? Okay, the Paro v'yomer avi achayitz v'nchav v'korachah etc. V'yomer el Paro l'gur ba'aretz banu ki ein mara letzon. So he told them to go to that particular land because it's good for being a shepherd. The ikar banu b'shvil hatzon lechein lo yacholnu l'sheir hatzon sham kazeh kedei lo yitztarchu liyot yachad im hamitzrayim kamash umrim chazal. So we have to understand, what did Yosef want to do when he brought the brothers to Mitzrayim? This is very important, by the way. This is the first time. Last week's parsha was actually the first time when the Jewish people are called Bnei Yisrael. And even though leading up to this, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were all about bringing everybody together, well, mostly Avraham, bringing everybody together, teaching people monotheism, making one big happy group. It wasn't a nation quite yet. You can call it a large family. There's other terms have been used, chieftain, whatever you want to call this group. It wasn't a nation yet. The Bnei Yisrael, to become a nation, had to become distinct, had to become somehow unique, not necessarily better, not worse, but to be a chosen nation, they had to be somehow distinct. Something had to stick out about the Jewish people. And that's the job of this next generation. That's what Yosef realized. Yosef realized that when I bring these people into Mitzrayim, when I bring my family into Mitzrayim, if I want them to stay, my family, if I want them to become a nation of Bnei Yisrael, to do that, they have to somehow be distinct. They need to go somewhere far away from everybody else in Goshen, where they can take care of their animals, and nobody else is going to bother them, because no one's going to want to even see a shepherd with his goat, with his goat herd, and the sticks and the whips and everything else. That's just something that nobody else is going to want to do, and that way the people will be able to stay unique in Mitzrayim. And thus says the holy Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Zecher Tzedek Levracha. We're still within the year of mourning him, so it's every opportunity I can, I'd like to bring some of his Torah. And there's quite a bit, Baruch Hashem. All right, we're going to skip to just a little bit. We skip from chapter 45, verse 10. Now we're going to go to 45, verse 12. Right, two verses later, and it's still Yosef speaking to his brothers before they meet Pharaoh. So that was sort of like we fast forwarded to 8, Now we're going to go back to verse 12. V'hine einechem ra'ot ve'ine achi Binyamin ki pi hamidaber aleichem. You see, behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of your brother Binyamin. Ki pi hamidaber aleichem. Because you see, what do you see? That my mouth is speaking to you. My mouth is speaking to you. Ki pi hamidaber aleichem. What does that phrase even mean? So, as promised, we're going to go first to Rashi. What does Rashi say? Hine einechem ra'ot, you see, b'chvodi she'ani achichem she'ani mahul, etc. You see that I'm just like you. I have a brit milah and everything. But then he says, Ki pi midaber aleichem, my mouth is speaking to you. Bilashon hakodesh. How do you know that I'm a Jew? Because I'm speaking to you in Lashon HaKodesh, in a holy language, which is Hebrew, biblical Hebrew. He spoke Hebrew. Nobody else spoke Hebrew. So it's a pretty good jump to assume that indeed he is as Jewish as you. But the Meshech Chochmah has a problem with this. And he writes this, he quotes the verse, he quotes the Rashi, and then he says, Pirush, Shiritzono haya lehitapek lehavi v'ofanim ha'ele et Yaakov, kimufurash b'midrash, ach haya savur shelo yerech yared ki bachutz ein ruach hakodesh shora, ruach hakodesh shora. So he brings from the Midrash that Yosef knew that Yaakov was concerned about coming to Egypt. How is this going to convince Yaakov to come to Egypt? The fact that he's speaking Hebrew. Maybe he picked it up from somebody else. Maybe he had a Jewish slave. Maybe Yosef is actually his slave, and he taught him Hebrew, and now he knows Hebrew, and probably other people knew Hebrew, people traveling through, selling things. They learn each other's languages. It's normal. So there's other ways to know Hebrew. So how is that going to convince Yaakov to come down? It's not. But what is going to convince Yaakov to come down is an argument. And the argument goes like this. Yaakov might not want to go to Egypt, whether Yosef is there or not, because Yaakov does not want to lose his Ruach HaKodesh. By the way, I don't know if Yosef knew this or not. At this point, according to Rashi, according to Chazal, Yaakov didn't have Ruach HaKodesh. He didn't have the spirit of prophecy because he was depressed over Yosef's disappearance. And whenever somebody's depressed, they don't have Ruach HaKodesh. You can't, you need to have sort of a presence of mind in order to really focus and be in understanding, in any understanding way to understand Hashem. You have to be able to focus, and you can't focus when you're depressed. Yeah, some of us know from experience. All right, but either way, the fact is that he has this Ruach HaKodesh, and he doesn't want to lose it. And again, in Yosef's mind, I'm not sure he knew that Yaakov didn't have this at this point. Anyway, so he doesn't want to lose Ruach HaKodesh, and there's a statement that Ruach HaKodesh, Ein Ruach HaKodesh, Shora, sorry, Kibachutz Ein Ruach HaKodesh Shora. That outside of Israel, there is no Ruach HaKodesh. You can't have real communion with God outside of Israel. That's what it says in Chazal. Dira kol zeh shenavar Yosef lo sharta alav shchina she'en shchina shora ma'atzvot. But he didn't. Okay, sorry, I predicted. So he says here Yosef didn't know that he didn't have Ruach HaKodesh at that point because he was already depressed. Aval kevan sheyidu Yaakov miyad yasig Ruach HaKodesh v'shuv lo yirtza levo leMitzrayim. He wouldn't want to go down to Egypt to lose the Ruach HaKodesh again. L'chein amar ki pi hamidaber ki yadua she'amram betanit. As it says in the Gemara in Tanit. It says in the Gemara in Tanit, what? Al nahar kvar asher haya nichbar. So speaking of the prophet Yechezkel, who was outside of Israel when he prophesied, the Gemara explains Al nahar kvar asher haya michbar. He was able to prophesy over the Jordan River outside of Israel because he started prophesying in Israel. So once you start in Israel, you don't lose it. Im kain kevan shesharsh alav shchina be'eretz Israel, because the shchina came to him and he was attached to Hashem in Israel. Shuv lo yafsik af b'chutz la'aretz. It won't even leave him in chutz la'aretz. V'zeh amar ki pi hamidaber. That's why he says, my mouth is speaking to you. Rotzelomar, not that he's speaking Hebrew. Rashi doesn't say Lashon Ivrit. It says Lashon Kodesh, which we assumed, as we should, that it means Hebrew. Rotzelomar b'Lashon Ruach HaKodesh. Kemo be'eretz Yisrael. I am speaking to you with a mouth that speaks with prophecy because I started doing that in Israel. You start in Israel, you're able to then have Ruach HaKodesh and travel with it. I guess it comes in a travel size that you can put in your luggage. All right, that's far the Meshech Chochmah. All right, we're going to skip to chapter 45, verse 27. Yeah, not far, just 15 verses later. It's a very short parsha, by the way. It's only about not very short, but it's 106 pesukim, if I'm not mistaken, which is shorter than the average. But anyway, so this is when the brothers came back to Yaakov to try to convince him to come down to Mitzrayim, and they said to him, "Vidabru elav et kol divrei Yosef." They said to him everything that Yosef said, Asher diber alehem, that he said to them, "V'yar et hagalot," and then he saw the agalot, the wagons, right? Asher shalach Yosef laseit oto, that he brought to bring him. Vathi ruach Yaakov avihem, and the ruach, the soul, the spirit of their father Abraham, of their father Yaakov, came back. It was revived, as Sfaria translates it. Very well said. And on this verse where it says, that he was revived, right? Et kol divrei Yosef, siman masar lahem, mahaya osek sheperesh mimenu. He sent with them proof that it was Yosef. And what was the proof? That he sent to them the last thing that he learned with his father. Sheparshat egla arufa zahu ne'amar vayar et ha'agalot shalach Yosef. So there's a play on words here. For those of you who are collecting the puns of the Torah, this is one of them. It's not very funny, but it's still a pun, right? Because they're learning about egla arufa, which is the subject of the killing of a cow when there's a when they find a dead body close to a city. They measure to the closest city, and then the elders of that city are supposed to take basically responsibility somewhat for this unsolved mystery, unsolved murder, and they're supposed to bring a calf and break its neck. That's called egla rufa. It's a mitzvah that's discussed in detail in Parshat Devarim, not Parshat, in Sefer Devarim. And so here you have that was the last thing that he and his father learned before his father said, "Go check on those brothers who want to kill you. Go see what go see all by yourself what they're up to. No, definitely don't wear Kevlar. No, they don't want to do anything bad to you." Anyway, so last thing he learned was about egla arufa. So egla arufa, agalot. You see, there's a connection. There's a similar root in the wagons. I'm not sure why wagons are called agalot. Probably have to look it up in Rav Hirsch. He probably writes about it. Anyway, but certainly the spelling is the same. Ayin gimel lamed, egla agalot. So there you go. And there you have it. And because of here it says that's convenient. Look, the Pharaoh tells us what pasuk it's in. If you want to look it up, it's in Devarim 21:6. And since that's the last thing they were learning, so that's the thing. So I have a maral here in Gur Ari, which is commentary on Rashi. What I wanted to do really was look at another maral, but time wasn't very friendly to me today, so I didn't get a chance to really bring it. But maybe next year. The question is, this is a stretch. You have to admit, it's not exactly unless he had the word agalot, like the ayin gimel lamed underlined on the wagons. It's kind of a stretch that this is the proof that this is Yosef. Now, it's perfectly normal to send wagons, to transport people, especially older people. So, like, this is it shouldn't really be a proof that it's Yosef. It's a stretch. And Chazal know it, and that's why there's a lot of commentary on this Rashi. Right now, we'll look at the Gur Ari and see what he says. So why are we focusing on Egla Rufa here all of a sudden? The thing they were learning about in Egla Rufa is what happened to him. A mystery. Well, not a murder, but actually, in a way, yes. There was, for a long time, Yaakov was under the impression that Yosef was murdered. Just like that was the last thing they learned. So he wanted to remind him what happened to him by reminding him about this Egla Rufa that they learned about. He writes more. There's other opinions. There's other ways to understand this, but I think that's a very important thing. Like, what were they learning? They were learning Egla Rufa. Why Egla Rufa? Like, there's no other mitzvah they could have been learning before he left. It's like Yaakov says to Yosef, let's sit down before you go to check on your brothers. Let's learn a little something. What should we learn? Let's see. Look, it's Hanukkah time. Should we look at a Hanukkah book? I don't know. Let's learn about Eglah Rufa. It's kind of strange, right? Of all the things it could be learning, and that's where things stop. It's not even the end of the Torah. Does that mean that they didn't learn the rest of Devarim? It doesn't seem that way. So he's saying in that subject matter that we were learning was an indication of what would happen to me. All right. Let's talk about the big meeting. This is it. This is a very important verse. This is what 3 parshot in a row sort of were leading up to this particular verse, right? Chapter 46, verse 29. V'yasor Yosef markavto, v'yal likrat Yisrael aviv. Yosef got his chariot and he went to see his father Yisrael, in Goshen. V'yarei love, and he was in front of him. V'yarei love, and he was seen in front of him. V'yipol al tzavarav, and he fell on his neck. V'yef, and he cried al tzavarav od, and he cried on his neck a lot of crying. Says Rashi on this verse. He asks the question: what does it mean he was seen? Right? It's pretty obvious that he's there, right? You can't cry on somebody's neck if you're not there. So what are you adding? Remember, there's no extra words in the Torah. So these 2 words, ve'era elav, and he was seen to him. He presented it as look at this. This is how a Sephardia translates. He presented himself to him. It's cute, but it's not even that much. But he doesn't have to present himself, right? Without that phrase, the rest of the verse makes a lot of sense. Joseph ordered his chariot, went to Goshen to meet his father, right? Embracing him around his neck. He wept on his neck a good while. You don't need he presented himself. What's the dramatic effect of that? Remember, the Torah doesn't usually do that kind of thing. We have very, very little detail in the Torah. I was just speaking with somebody just yesterday about it. Somebody said, we don't know what Sarah Imeinu was like. We don't know. I said, we don't know what Sarah Imeinu was like. We don't know Abraham's mother's name. We don't know what Abraham ate for breakfast. We don't know most of the course of his day. We have like one picture, one story in all of Tanakh that tells us what he did. And each one of those phrases, each one of those words, each one of those letters teaches us things about how to behave. We're not telling stories here. Every story in the entire Torah, especially Sefer Bereshit, is to teach us how to behave. Because really and truly, as the Midrash says in the very beginning in Bereshit, the Torah could have started with Mishpatim. Elah Mishpatim. These are the laws. Do this, do that. What do we need the stories about the forefathers for? And the answer is to teach us how to actually behave, how to be a mensch, how to be a good person. And then once we have those midot down, then we can get into the nitty gritty of Jewish law, right? Reshit Chachma Yirat Hashem. Before you get into and derech eretz kadmol Torah, same idea, right? You need to have some derech eretz. You need to know how to be a good person before you can get into Torah. So anyway, going off on a rant here a little bit, but let's get back to the Lev Eliyahu, or Rav Eliyahu Lopian, who we rarely quote, unfortunately. I think we might have quoted him only like once before in all of these classes so far. I don't know why that would be the case. One of his descendants, because a grandson of Rav Eliyahu Lopian, was one of my son's rebbeim in yeshiva. But there's a lot of great Torah from him, the Lev Eliyahu. Very important Musar work, if you get a chance. He quotes the verse. He quotes the Rashi. Imken lechora mai hidesh kan Rashi. What is Rashi teaching us? What's the Torah teaching us? Hello, zehu pirish hamilim shel veyar elav. Isn't that the meaning of he was seen? That did we look at the Rashi? Right. Sorry. We didn't look at the Rashi. Sorry. Rashi says, we already love Yosef Nira El Aviv. Yosef appeared before his father. He was seen. Okay. So what's Rashi trying to tell us here? The Hine the Yosef Haya Be'etahi Beit Hargashot Na'alot V'Gagon Chazekim V'Niflaim Ma'od. He had two very, very contradictory, but two very important thoughts at this time. Number one, Aleph, Shiratza Lirot et Pnei Aviv Shelo Yira'ahu Gzeh Esrim Shtayim Shana. He hasn't seen his father in a long time, right? 22 years, right? And he wants to see him. He misses him. And what a father it is! It isn't like Huckleberry Finn's father. This is a great man. Right? Yaakov Avinu, Adam Shebemerkava. His face is on the chariot of Hashem, whatever that means. He's a great man. So he's got that feeling. I want to see this person, my father. And this is one of the beautiful things about Musar, by the way. I heard. I don't want to get into it. Anyway, it's one of the beautiful things about Musar is that when you study it, you're able to break down your thoughts. You know what I mean? You're able to parcel out how you think and what you think and get to what the truth is. So here's Yosef, and part of his brain, left side, right side, I don't care. One of the hemispheres of his brain wants to see his father Avram, Yaakov. What's the second part? Bet. Ki halo yada vaday ad kama aviv mitgagel lirot panav be'ota hamida ve'od yoter. He doesn't know how much his father is mitgagel, is trembling, is in great desire to see his face. Right? His father wants to see him. Hello, you did. He doesn't know the hay in front of the low isn't low. It isn't like he doesn't know. Doesn't he know? He's for sure he knows that his father wants to see him very much. So he's got two very different things that he's intending. Number one, he wants to see his father. He has his own intent, his own desire to see his wonderful, amazing father. But he also wants to please his father, right? A completely different idea here. He wants his father to be happy. He wants his father to see him. Okay? So, Beit Hagashot Elu, Kol Achad Diya Lemalot Kol Achel Hargesher Libo. Mayase, he's got these two conflicting things. Which one should he do? Shekal Yosef Bedato. Yosef didn't know. Which should he do? Should he intend to please his father, or should he please himself in seeing his wonderful father? Right? It's sometimes in this particular case, it happens to be that this one event will allow him to do both of these things. But there are times and situations in life when that's not the case. When your pleasure and your desire to do whatever it is you want to do is in some way a contradiction to this mitzvah that you have of pleasing your father. Right? Shaviv Yereoto Kulomar La'amud Mipnei Aviv. He stood in front of his father. So what this means is V'kulo Yamar Kavod. And he did it with complete honor of his father. Avi, my father. Hare Ritzon Chalirot Oti Ra'ana. You want to see me? See me. He stood in front of his father with like neon signs pointing at himself, saying, look at me. You want to see me? Here I am. I want you to get all that you want out of this. Forget about what I want. I want to see you. I'll forget that for a moment. I want you to see me and get that pleasure. V'zehu ma sheromes b'Torah v'yasher Yosef mirkavto. That's what it means. He ordered his chariot b'machshava nechona, with the correct intent. V'kana kedusha, and all for holy reasons. V'yal likrot Yaakov aviv Goshen v'yar elav. He wanted to be seen by his father in Goshen, and he stood in front of him to be seen. Kolomer yamid kol atzma lifnei aviv v't'areh lo. V'hainu ma shepirish Rasha v'yar elav Yosef nira el aviv. He became visible to his father, because he wanted to fulfill that intent of his father to see him. He's like, look at me, here I am. I think, if I may be so bold, I think there's a lot to say about this parsha. But what we started with, the second thing we said from Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, right, about how Elu ve'elu is very important, especially for this holiday that's coming up next week. I don't know how many of you know this, but there's a fast day coming up next week, Sarah B'Tevet, and according to some of our more ancient sources, right, there's actually 3 days of fasting in a row, the 8th, 9th, and 10th. Nobody does this anymore, but one of the fast days is for the translation of the Torah. One of them is for the Yartzeit of Ezra HaSofer, probably one of the most, if you like, have a top 5 most important Jews in Jewish history, he's probably in that list. There would not be a Judaism without this. I mean, obviously there would be, Hashem wants there to be, but without this human being, without Ezra HaSofer and the things he did to bring the Jews back to Israel, etc., I'm not sure how strong the Jewish people would be today. But one of the days, like I said, was for the translation of the Torah into the Septuagint by Ptolemy. And we don't often understand why should we fast for that? We translate the Torah all the time. There's Art Scroll, there's Feldheim, there's all these books and commentaries, and there's even the Midrash is translated already. What's wrong with translation? The problem is, first of all these companies are translating books for the Jews. The non-Jewish world, like Ptolemy's world, when they have the Bible translated, it just becomes one other book of wisdom. It goes on the shelf with other books of wisdom. You know, this Gita and this and the Quran and all these books are all on the same shelf in Ptolemy's library. Well, we don't know anymore because the Muslims burned it down in Alexandria, over 1,000 years ago. But up until that point, right, the Septuagint was there on the shelf with all these other books that are equal. We have to understand the Torah is not equal. And like I said with the Rav Yaakov's commentary, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim, that phrase, that idea that all of the commentaries on the Torah, all that's commentary on the Hebrew Torah, the Lashon Kodesh, the Ruach HaKodesh, right? The Lashon Kodesh of the Torah is very deep. There's a lot to learn, and every single phrase, there's not an extra word, and there's not an extra phrase, and even sometimes there's multiple interpretations of the same phrase, and all of them are right, as long as they're based in Torah. Somebody else, Ptolemy, would have written a commentary on the Torah, so we wouldn't have very much respect for it, right? It's just another king showing off his wisdom, right? It would be to us, it would be like Pharaoh, right? To borrow a phrase from Yehuda. And so the Torah is very big. The Torah is very beautiful, and this parsha class, this 1 hour parsha class, could certainly not capture the entire parsha. Obviously, we've got 2 other parsha classes in the Vayigash playlist that you can check out on their YouTube channel. But if you don't get a chance to do that, please take a chance to whip out a Torah sometime this week. Look at Parshat Vayigash and learn some. It's a beautiful thing. Thank you for listening, and have a great rest of your week. I'm going to stop the live feed to Facebook, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.